Record. All right. So, um, today we're here to talk about the test. I have to give you the caveat that, of course, none of this is medical advice. I'm not giving you this from the position of any kind of medical license or medical professional standpoint, or any affiliation that I have with the medical field is not relevant right now. I'm just talking to you as another still COVIDing person who tries really hard to keep up with the data to keep my family safe, just like you guys keep up with the data to keep your family safe. And so that's where I'm coming from when I'm talking about these tests. And just trying to see here. Christina, do you know, like right now, I can only see you on my screen, and in the recording, am I only going to be able to, are they only going to be able to see you on the screen? I was trying to get myself to pop up as the speaker, but I've put it in speaker view and it's not working for me. And I also now can't get you, there we go, off mute.
When you did it before, it recorded, when you had it in speaker mode, it only showed you, but the first time when you recorded it, it showed, I think, most of what your screen was. So sometimes it was you and sometimes it was other people. And
okay, well, I've got it in speaker mode now. It's not showing me it in speaker mode. Can you guys, well, I guess that depends on you guys' setting. When I start showing test and screen sharing though, I guess just tell me if you can see the screen share or not, and then we'll have to move forward from there. Because right now, Christina, all I see is you.
I see, I have three screens. I have Kara, me, and Dorothy Graham.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right. So anyway, hopefully the recording will work. If not, then we'll have to beg off of technical difficulties too. But let me go ahead and get started. So I just grabbed some of the tests and the testing systems that I have in my house to sort of just talk to you in almost a stream of conscious about where we are with the test, and why I make the choices that I make about testing for my high risk family. And most of you who've been around for a while and who know me also know that my family is, my children have post-infectious encephalopathy, like infectiously triggered encephalopathy. And so our family is pretty high risk. They're also all immunosuppressed, so they fall in the immunocompromised category. My kiddos, not me. And so that's one of the reasons why I do my best and try to keep up to date as much as I can with COVID, as well as my position in my real world job as administrator of medical clinics that deal with people who have immunovulnerability and who also have long COVID. So those are my sort of internal motivations for keeping up with the data and keeping up with what's going on in the testing world. And so in the beginning, we all had our drive-through PCR test that we could pretty easily access for the most part. Or we had, health departments, physicians' offices, lots of places where we could go and grab a PCR. And of course, the government was paying for it. So it wasn't at a cost to us. And the turnaround times, though, were problematic. It could be a while. Of course, we didn't have therapeutics at the time, so we didn't have this like sense of urgency, which, oh, I need to go get the Paxlovid, so I need my positive to come back within the 5 days, et cetera, et cetera. There wasn't that kind of pressure, but of course you wanted to know if you had COVID or didn't have COVID. But and then from there we have the rapid antigen test that came, and at first we were all sort of really excited about having these home tests, but then we figured out that they're only really overall, most of the brands are about 60% accurate. And they're much worse for false negatives than for false positives. And so most of us in the still COVIDing community learned that we really quickly that we couldn't rely on the rapid antigen tests to tell us whether or not we had COVID and keep us safe from people who had COVID as well, just because there's a pretty high rate of failure of those tests. Now, in just a second, I'm going to show you data for a specific test and talk about how that's the rapid that I would use. But in general, we would rather not use rapids for detection, especially asymptomatic detection. Now, what rapids are good for is testing out of contagiousness. Now, there are a small percentage of people who never test positive on a rapid antigen test. It's a very, very small number, but there are some people who don't. And part of that could, again, be, some of the immune deficiency pieces, or part of it could be that they have a very, very low viral load, and so they're not sort of mounting a response. But for the most part, most people will test positive on a rat at some point of their infection, whether or not that was the way that they initially detected infection. And if you have a positive rat test, you are contagious. It doesn't matter if you're on day 30. This whole, you can have after 5 days, it doesn't matter if you're positive, you can test out and not infect other people, is just quite frankly bullshit. If you have a positive rapid antigen test, you have enough viral load that your body is mounting the response, and you would still be able to pass that on to other people. And so using the rapid antigen test to test out of contagiousness is what they're really good for. And so after a while, we were able to sort of come up with a rule of thumb that if you take if you're past day 5, well, I think actually we said day 7, because there is that whole rebound thing that happened even before, but Paxlovid rebound was a thing. I'm not even sure Paxlovid rebound is really a thing, because we had people rebounding after, even before Paxlovid was available. But we said day 7, actually. If you're past day 7 and you take a rat test, 2 rat tests that are 48 hours apart, so usually people would take one like day 6 and day 8, then you could test out of, and they were both negative, and you had 0 symptoms, then you could test out of being contagious and be around your family or go about your day. And so that's what we learned to use the rapids for, is to know, when basically our body had sort of fought off the virus and we were no longer contagious. And that's still what I would use the rapids for, by and large, for the most part, where we are today. Today, we do still have access to the NAAT test. And so the rat test, the rapid antigen test, are sort of, to me, like the cheap and easy kind of layer that's not super great, but good for screening. And it is good for testing out of infectiousness. And then you have your NAAT test, your nucleic amplification tests. And PCR is actually a specific kind of NAAT test, but you have other kinds of NAAT tests now, which are like your Luceras and your Metrics, and what was the old one, the Detect, I think, the one that went out of business. Those have, better quality. Those have closer to PCR quality. They use primers and nucleic amplification like PCRs do. And when those became available at home, a lot of us got really, really excited and happy, and we switched to those. And we still use those as we can. They're not cheap, and they've sort of fluctuated in price as the pandemic has progressed. But using a NAAT test should give you better sensitivity, specificity, and overall accuracy than relying on the rat to detect infection. Now, once you are infected and once your rats are positive, then you can, go on and use the rats to figure out when you're not infectious. But to figure out if you have an infection in the quickest and most accurate way possible, then the NAAT test became sort of our fallback and much easier. Most of us would have gone and gotten a PCR confirmation, just because PCR is still sort of the gold standard. But the NAAT test got us to that PCR quality at home. And then we started having problems, right, with the NAAT test because of availability. As demand for testing, dropped, just like some of the little mask companies that got started. And in the beginning, there was this PPE shortage, and all of the mask companies had bunches of stock, and all these new happy masks came out, and flow masks came out, and all of the other things that were popping. Some of these new companies, like those, survived, but other smaller companies that started up and tried to sort of get on the pandemic bandwagon to get into the PPE thing, they ended up starting to fail because the demand wasn't there. And that happened also to the NAATs too. So some of the NAATs, like the Detect system, they went bankrupt. Lucera went bankrupt, and then was actually bought out in the reorganization by Pfizer. And so they are still around. Well, I'll give that update in just a second. But that's the danger and the trouble with these new technologies. As we have a novel virus, and we have new technologies that come out to help us combat the novel virus, then some of these little startups will not necessarily, it's not because they don't have a good technology, but from a business side, as demand and supply supply and demand fluctuate, or as supply chain issues hit or whatever, then they fail, and then we as the consumers are left without those kinds of tools. And so that's sort of a synopsis of, in a nutshell. I'm sure a lot of you have lived that right along with me and understand, but I know we also do have some newer people to the groups, as evidenced by some of the posts lately. And so I think it's just worth a little recap there of where we were and where we've come now. So one thing I would like to say about the availability of PCR right now is, please, everyone, try to source a PCR place before you need it. When you think you have COVID and you're panicked, or you're brain fogged because you do have COVID, or even you're just stressed out because you've had an exposure and you may have COVID, that is not the time to go and source where you can get a PCR in your neighborhood. And this does sort of change, and so you need to sort of keep an eye, maybe put it on the first of the month calendar along with paying your rent or your mortgage. Let's just double check and make sure that that PCR option that I sourced is still available to me, because in the beginning, like I said, we had the little drive ups, which most of them have shut down, and then we were able to do like pharmacies and smaller labs, and now it can be a little bit tricky sometimes to figure out where you're going to get that PCR when you need it. And most people still would like, especially in our community, they would like to have a PCR as confirmation, regardless of how they're testing on other tests. I don't really think you need a PCR if you, have positive rat test or positive NAAT test that are consistent. There's also, no test is perfect. Every test is going to have its pros, its cons, and no test is going to be 100% accurate ever. And so just make sure that you're making your testing plan and your treatment plan before you actually need it, to the best of your ability. I know it's not easy to get like metformin ahead of time, or even Paxlovid ahead of time, but you should have a plan in place for, and preferably written down. So all you have to do is grab your paper and say, okay, the Walgreens on First Street was still offering PCRs with a 48-hour turnaround, 7 days a week. That's where I'm headed as soon as I think I might have COVID. Or, okay, I know that this Doc in the Box service that gives Paxlovid, is available 24/7, and here's the information. There's a lot of posts in our groups about where people have gotten Paxlovid online, or even metformin online. There's a lot of information in our groups. Particularly, I think we have some of our biggest archives still in high risk, since it's our biggest group. Although we also have some of our archives, I think, over in Forward Motion. But just make sure that you have a written plan where you're going to get your PCR test and where you're going to get your therapeutics if you don't already have them, and get that stuff together before you're testing positive. And I know, like about a year ago, I think I even did a little COVID box Zoom where I had all my little COVID boxes and they were organized, and made sure that when we test positive, it was all written down what to do or whatever. And then that was a year ago, and now I know that I need to do it again, because we went in our COVID boxes and dug out the antihistamine that we needed for something else. Or knock on wood, luckily COVID has not hit my house yet, so we sort of used some of the things there, and now I need to replace them and make sure that some of the things haven't just skirted off, and ever so being prepared before COVID hits the house can save a lot of time and stress that you're already going to be under if you do get COVID in the first place. So now, let me just talk a little bit again about some of these testing options that we have. The first thing I want to talk about is the rapid that I would use. And I actually don't have any here because I am overrun still with the different rapids that are in date from when the government would send them out. And there's, 4 people in my house, and we sort of maxed all the things. And we still have rapids that are in date under the extended dates, and even not under the extended dates that we would use. And we don't use rapids for initial detection. If at some point the NAATs become unavailable or inaccessible to us, then look, Christina's showing you some more different kinds of rapids that she has. There's just a gazillion different brands and a gazillion different things. Yeah, I think I have some of the eye healths too. And so we all are pretty familiar with these. But the rapid that I think stands out above all of the others is the FlowFlex. And those of you who sort of hang out in my circles know that I did a fair amount of research a few months back when it looked like that the NAATs might not be available to figure out what would be the best rapid. And the FlowFlex Rapid, which is the same as the On the Go single, and a lot of people don't know that. The On the Go double is a different manufacturer and it's a different test, but the little yellow box On the Go single is the same as the FlowFlex Rapid. Same manufacturer, same test. Those, as far as I can find, have the best sensitivity, specificity, and accuracy to as a rapid test. And so as I was digging, I'm going to share my screen over here so you can see what I'm talking about. This is one of the studies that I found, a clinical study report for the FlowFlex antigen rapid test. And it actually was, I mean, it's not thousands of people, but it's a decent size. They had 605 nasal specimens from multiple sites in China and the US. And we're not going to read the whole study, but I'm just going to fly you down here to the end, and I can post this in the files if we haven't already. We may have. And the conclusion is that based on these specimens and these samples compared to the RT-PCR, the FlowFlex test has a sensitivity of 97% and a specificity of 99.5. That gives them a total accuracy of 98.8% when compared with the PCR, which is pretty damn good, guys. Comparing this, so the PCR again is going to be 99% accurate, and then having you're having a rapid antigen that is running, you know, an accuracy of 98% when compared to the PCR is pretty good. And so that also led me to looking here, and this is actually your package insert from the FlowFlex and some of the data here on the insert. Let me see if I can, yeah, it's right here under this. I'm going to make it bigger. Hopefully you can see it. Oops. Right here. It shows you again, this is that same study here that showed that the sensitivity is 97.1, the specificity and overall accuracy is 98.8. Then they had another layperson study of 136, which had a slightly lower sensitivity of 93, but specificity of 100 compared with the PCR test. So you're getting a lot more accuracy than you are with any of the other rapids and any of the other tests that we saw. I actually sort of like this insert too, because if you look here, it also tells you, so, you know, basically sensitivity is, do I detect something? And specificity is it actually coronavirus? And then that gives you, you know, sort of that together can give you an accuracy rate. This tells you they actually tested the FlowFlex for cross-reactivity to some of these other common like viruses and bacteria that would live in your respiratory tract, and no cross-reactivity or interference was observed with the following microorganisms. And then they also tested these interfering substances like afrin and chloroseptic and nasal crom and Tamiflu and muprosin. And so they went through and they tested this, and they also found that the substances listed below were found not to detect test performance. And so I always appreciate it when a company goes in and sort of does their due diligence this way. So then the question is, well, how does this compare to our tests like our Lucera or our Q or our metrics? And so if you just pull up the Lucera, this is actually from Lucera. It's one of the Lucera flyers they sent me, I don't know, about a year ago, or maybe it was February 2022. But anyway, again, if you're looking here at sensitivity, specificity, and accuracy, you're getting a total 98% here on the Lucera. So if I'm getting a total of 98% here on the Lucera, and I'm getting a total of 98% on the FlowFlex, I've got sort of a comparable assay. Two different kinds of assays, but if you have to use the rats, now personally, I still sort of lean over toward those NAATs just because detecting the nucleic amplification for me, just it feels like, and it may even be looking at this data, it may even be more of an like an emotional feeling rather than a data-driven feeling, but having a test that is nucleic amplification just feels more like I would be easier to it would be easier to catch it or detect it to me, even if that may not actually be the case from the data. So as long as the NAATs are available at my house, we will still use the NAATs, but it's very reassuring to me. And actually, in a pinch, like for example, when my son ran out of his NAATs and he needed to test for a situation, he grabbed Flowflexes because they're pretty easily available. You also should know there are two kinds of Flowflexes. There's one kind of Flowflex that does not have approval in the U.S. And so you just sort of want to make sure if you're buying them online, you get the one that does have approval with the U.S. And if you need help looking at that, you can go to the FDA website, and it tells you specifically. It's the God, I get them mixed up. One of them is, I think, an orange box, and one of them is a purple box. And I think the purple box is approved and the orange isn't, or vice versa. But if you're getting them on the shelf at your pharmacy, they're not going to have them on the shelf, the version that's not approved. So that's my sort of, you can use a Flowflex if the NAATs are too expensive for you, or the NAATs don't become available, then using the Flowflex or the single on the go, which is the same as the Flowflex, would definitely be an option. Now, luckily, we do still have NAATs available for us. The NAATs that we have available for us right now are, we have the Q test, and the Q test was sort of the first readily available consumer NAAT. It's just a little box, and it plugs in, has a cord, and it plugs into the wall, and then you have a cartridge here that you stick in to the Q. Qs run about $50 a test now. They you used to be able to bulk buy them and get them cheaper, but they've sort of, as they've gained popularity, and they've also partnered with Pfizer. They're not owned by Pfizer, but they're partnering with Pfizer for their test and treat kind of program. So the minute you get a positive Q, this connects to an app on your phone, and the minute you get a positive Q, you can hit some buttons and you can talk to a doctor anywhere in the U.S. and they will RX you Paxlovid and get it to you sort of overnight. The other kind of advantage of the Q test is the minute a test errors, and they will all error, okay? Every single one of these uses reagents for their nucleic amplification. If the reagents get too hot, it's going to error. If they freeze, it's going to error. If the acidity or the pH or there's interfering chemicals that in your mouth say that you've eaten or drinking something before you've done these tests, and you're also using the preferred method of swabbing the throat and the nose, we can talk about that in a second, they can error. So none of them are fail safe. We always try to keep at least two on hand, because if the first one errors, you want to be able to do a repeat. The cool thing is that they do say error versus trying to give you an inaccurate result. Now, with the Luceras and even the Detects, there have been some false positive results that we've had, particularly when people have had something to eat or drink within the 30 minutes before they took the test. And so it is important. And again, if you're using the throat swab, to increase your sensitivity to make sure that you're not eating or drinking at least 30 minutes before you take these tests, because that will affect them. But anyway, advantages of the Q: hooks you directly to a doctor, immediately replaces your test cartridges with no hassle. And also, the other thing with the Q is they are not likely to ever really fold in the near future, because they have partnerships with I think it's the Major League Baseball uses the Q. They have big corporate partnerships that keep them going. They have the Pfizer connection with the prescribing that keeps them going. They are doing other things now, like UTI test and flu test and other kinds of tests. And so if you do have a Q, and I think they still right now have you can buy a certain number of tests and get a free reader, or they run that periodically, we're always likely to have Q availability. Now, the downside of the Q obviously is cost. Who can, depending on how you use these nucleic amplification tests, if you're like my family who has, basically used these kinds of tests to be able to venture out cautiously in certain situations in the world. So we use them with our weekly COVID cautious homeschool co-op, and we also use them weekly for my daughter to be able to practice with her band. $50 twice a week is $100 a week, which is $400 a month, which is a pretty huge expense if you're trying to use these as your primary testing modality, and that makes accessibility an issue. And that's why it was so great when the Luceris and the Detects came along, and they were running around $35 a test, and that made it accessible for another layer of people. And so I have an idea to do like still COVIDing on a budget here pretty soon, and definitely the budget option for testing right now would be FlowFlex. But there are these other kinds of options that are cheaper and more accessible for people with the Q. Now, the Q also is not portable. Not designed to be portable, but it does plug into just a regular wall outlet. And so I've used the Q, for example, when other people in our co-op didn't have tests yet. We've used the Q with our little portable Jennies or our Jackeries, or if you have an outlet in your car, you can just plug it into your little portable battery box or the outlet in your car, as long as it's a regular outlet. And that's how you can make it portable when versus these other tests that are a lot more portable, because they're either battery powered or they can run off of your little USB battery banks. This one doesn't. This one runs off of a regular wall charger. That's one kind of NAAT test. Then we also have the Lucera test. So what's up with the Lucera test, right? For those of you who haven't seen them, I'm sure most people have, but for those of you who haven't seen them, I can just show you. The Lucera test is pretty cool. It's got a little testing unit here that when you open it up, you just pop the back off and put your batteries in. It actually comes with the batteries, which again, to me, there's a lot of waste with the Lucera. It's one of my major gripes with the Lucera is that, they give you these AA batteries and you run one test on it, and then they tell you to throw the whole thing away. Please don't throw the whole thing away. Just take your AA batteries out, throw them in your battery drawer, and use them for whatever else you need to use. There's no reason to ditch perfectly good batteries after you've just run one test. But you put the batteries in the test, and after you put the batteries in the test, you also have this little chemical mixture here. I'm not actually going to use the whole test, but I'll just show you. There's a little vial here. You can pop the top off the vial. The vial sits right into the unit. There'll be a little green light here that says ready. And then it also comes with a swab. You take your swab. At my house, we swab 5 seconds on one side of the throat, swab 5 seconds on the other, 5 seconds in each nostril, and then we swish for 25 swipes. The cool thing about these Lucera tests, and this is not manufacturer approved, so this is not FDA approved, but if you understand the way that nucleic acid amplification works, all you need to get is some viral material on the swab, and then the viral material in this liquid is what's being detected. So there's nothing in the world that says only my viral material will be detected in here. I can take 3 or 4 people's viral material if I need to, and like Amazon has a pack of flocked nasal swabs for like $6 for 100 of them. And so these sit at my testing station. When we need to test, like say the whole family, you can, everyone can do a swab and swash into this little tube here, and you can do what's called a pool test. So instead of, like in my house, instead of using 4 Luceras, which would be, 35 times 4, we could just use 1 Lucera and test everybody. If everybody's negative, that's great. It'll say negative. negative, and we can go about our day. If it says positive, of course, you don't know who is positive. So then you would have to go open your individual Luceras and figure out who actually was testing positive. But that's one advantage to the Luceras. It's not really very easy to pool test a cube because there's only one swab and it's a proprietary swab, and to me there's a lot more variables. I know that there are a couple ways you could try to do it, but I would feel much less comfortable pooling a Q than I would with a Lucera. It's actually pretty easy to pool test the Luceras and figure out. And so if you have, say, a group that's meeting and your group again doesn't have the funds or accessibility to be able to buy Luceras for everybody, you actually could just pay the $6 for the swab, have everybody swab when they get there, swab and stir, and stay separated in their vehicles or in a separate space with their mask far away while you ran a Lucera and made sure that everybody there was negative. You would also need to make sure that everybody there understood not to eat or drink at least 30 minutes before they took that test. I think coffee is probably the worst thing that I've heard that will affect the pH of the test. And so these Luceras there, what happened was Lucera went bankrupt a few months ago. And when they went bankrupt, Pfizer bought them. And Pfizer stopped producing them. So the last batch of Luceras that is available on the shelf expires on October 25th, 2023. So we still have 2 months where we have these kinds of tests that are in date to be able to use. Now, again, when we've talked to, our resident virologists in our groups and some of the other people, if your reagents and your test goes bad, you should get an error. So it's not a hard and fast expiration date with these NAAT tests either. It less so than, I guess, with the rat test. But the last end date test you will be able to have are on October 25th, October 25th, 2023. So for now, at my house, we're sort of, since we used, two of these NAATs a week, they're still available for the end of October expiration. We are still using the Luceras as our primary test. And at the end of this presentation, I will actually tell you where you can get the Lucera test, and you can get the Lucera test at a discounted price with a code for our group. So they turn out being, I think, $31.50 a test. And you can sort of do the mental calculation in your mind for how many you need between now and the end of October, and you can stock up on these. Now, the question becomes, what are we doing after October? Those of us who really like the NAAT test and want to try to stick with the NAAT test for as long as possible. Again, remember, you always have the FlowFlex option to use as a rat, but when the Luceras are no longer available in October, what do we do? Well, there's always the Q, which is going to bring your cost up to $50 a test. And so that's one option. And then the other option looks like it's going to be metrics. And so I'm actually going to do a separate metrics presentation, so I'm not going to unbox and show you it here, but metrics is a little reader like this, sort of similar to the Q, except for what goes into the metrics is a little test. It's not a cartridge, it's a little test collection tube, sort of more like the Lucera, where you can use spit or you can use nasal swabs to be able to use your metrics test. And so I'm going to pause the video for a second to tell you, the recording for a second to tell you what's been going on with these, because I don't really want this part recorded. So give me 1 second here. Okay, so coming back and saying that metrics will probably, first of all, please, probably it's not a good idea to get your test from Peach Medical, because we have some concerns with the way that they store and they they store and they ship their test. But metrics will be available direct to consumer in a few weeks, and we'll be able to do a sort of a group buy discount at that point. So metrics will be an option in the future. But right now, my personal advice would be let's buy out the Luceros for the uh, uh, October 25 expiration date. And then after those are gone, then for November, hopefully we'll have it all organized and we can get the metrics from a vendor that actually does store them properly, and will be able to give us a better price and a more consistent supply. So where you can get those Luceros right now is if you go to Health Rover, so shophealthrover.com, you can see that they're not price gouging. They have the same $35 dollar price that they have for forever. These are the 10/25 23 expiration test. Right now in inventory, they have 800 tests. So I don't know that we'll sell out their 800 test, but when we put this out to all the groups, probably there's enough people that want the Lucera tests that we may sell out their 800. They do have the ability to buy another lot, so they'll watch us for the next 4 or 5 days. They'll see how many people are buying. If it looks like those 800 are gone, then they'll go ahead and get another lot in for us to be able to buy. And they've given us a discount code. The discount code is SC Fall 10. And the SC Fall 10 gives you another 10% off of this $35 price and brings it down to the $31.50, so that you can get the Luceras at a pretty decent rate. So my advice would be go ahead, figure up sort of in your head what you're using them for, how many of the tests that you need between now and the end of October. Get your stock now from Health Rover from between now and the end of October, and then stay tuned as we work out the issues with the metrics in the future, and then that will hopefully be another option that will run similarly priced for us to be able to use moving forward. If not, you have your options also of the Q, which is going to be more expensive, and then the Flow Flex, depending on how you want to mix and match those tests. And so, hope I haven't forgotten anything. With that, I am going to start looking at the chat and start answering some questions. So I see I have not been reading the chat, but it looks like people have been sort of going. So let me see here. Yes, make sure you have backup sources for PCR. I can't link to that. I can't link to this FlowFlex. Well, maybe I can link here in the chat, but it's a PDF that I think I need to download and upload to the group. Let me see. I'm going to copy here in the chat this FlowFlex clinical study report. If that doesn't work, though, I will take the PDF and try to get it in the files in high risk and forward motion. So y'all can click on that and tell me if it works or not. But I think I remember I have to PDF it. Let's see what else it said. Had so many false positives with the Lucera, it has me leaning towards the FlowFlex. Yeah, like I said, the Lucera can give a false positive. I think for the most part, the false positives come if you're not having a big enough interval when you're eating and drinking. And I know everyone's pH in their mouth is a little bit different, and everyone's biochemistry is a little bit different. My suggestion would be to, maybe observe an hour instead of the 30 minutes, or maybe do it first thing in the morning when you haven't had anything to eat or drink, if you're getting a lot of false positive errors on your Luceras. And then also always contact the company and find out, like, hey, I'm getting these false positives on your test. What am I doing? Can you tell me what's happening? Yes, get your plan in place for metformin, for Paxlovid for forever before you need it. And yes, I don't do the throat, tongue, and cheek. I just think that's a little bit of an overkill. If you when you have the virus and it colonizes places, usually when you have a respiratory virus and you breathe it in, The first place that it lands is in the back of your throat, and that's going to have like sort of your highest viral concentration, and then it sort of spreads out everywhere else. So what we do at my house is like I said, the my 8-year-old will go, oh, it's time to hit the gag again, and she hits the gag. We do 5 seconds on one side of the throat, 5 seconds on the other side of the throat, and then each nostril for 5 seconds. And a nasal pharyngeal, like the way you're supposed to do your PCRs or nasal pharyngeals, is you're supposed to get it all the way back through your nose till you're actually hitting the back of your throat. So all of these people who are like, oh, don't do your throat, well, like that's what you're doing with a nasal pharyngeal if you do it properly. Just a lot of people don't do the nasal pharyngeals all the way back to hit the back of their throat. So you can sort of think of yourself as doing a sort of easier to do nasal pharyngeal if you're doing throat, nose, nose. If it grosses you out, you can even use 2 different swabs. Do 1 swab on your throat, 1 swab on your nose. If you're doing 30 nasal swab only on Lucera, does the 30 minutes drinking apply? No, it does not, unless you're snorting something in your nose. I mean, I would not do like nasal sprays or anything for, at least 30 minutes before I did a nasal Lucera. But you can eat and drink if you're doing it nasally only. Does it include water? Well, at my house it does, just because I don't want like any kind of, sort of dilution or washing down of the viral load. I don't think water would be as it would interfere as much necessarily, depending on what kind of water you're drinking. But I would take, what I usually do before I test is I go grab a big drink of water and then I set my timer and make sure that I've got the 30-minute interval and I don't drink or eat anything in between. I have not had any problem sourcing FlowFlex. Now I don't shop at Costco, so that might be an issue, but there's several different places online that also will sell FlowFlex. So the problem is, does anyone know if FlowFlex is committed to continued production? I haven't heard any rumors. Oh, the Lucera is coming back. I forgot to say that, I think. Lucera is coming back, but they're coming back as a flu COVID combo swab only. They're not coming back as a simple just COVID swab. So you will be able to buy Lucera probably starting in October, but it's probably going to be closer to that $50 price point because it's going to be the flu and COVID combo. Just speaking of whether or not things are discontinued or not. The FlowFlex, I've not heard any rumors that we're going to have problems for, but we actually use FlowFlex in my clinic to test people, test every patient and their companions as they come in the door. And so if we ever have any trouble sourcing FlowFlexes, I will definitely let you guys know if there looks like there's going to be a problem with FlowFlex. Questions about the Q. If someone tests negative on the Q, are they for sure at least not contagious at that time? And is there a problem with a tradesperson test outside before entering how to do it outdoors? Okay, so number one, no test is 100%. And it does especially depend on two, like, what are you swabbing? Are you just barely running it around the rim of your nostril? Are you getting it up in there to get a good mucosal sample? Are you doing throat and nose? So it's not 100% that if you test negative on the Q, you wouldn't be contagious. But it's a good layer. It's a good, it's a good degree, better degree of confidence, certainly than nothing at all. I will also tell you, I do tell the story, and it's not to scare people, but I have an older son who does not COVID unless he is going to see us. And of course, if he's going to see us, then he does his quarantine period, and he actually does 4 tests before he can be around us and take his mask off. He can actually do 2 tests and see us outside with his mask on. But anyway, he doesn't COVID. He's had COVID 3 times. Yes, talk about like dagger in the heart of a mother, but whatever. He's 25. What can you do? But he and his girlfriend have had COVID 3 times, and they had a Q. And so they were able to immediately test. Each time he tested positive on the Q. And she tested negative on the Q, but they live at Princeton, and Princeton had free PCRs until 2 weeks ago on campus. Now they've also DC'd their PCRs, which really sucks, but they could go anytime and they could get a PCR, and they had like a 24-hour turnaround for free there on campus. And so every time, all 3 times, he was positive on the Q, she was negative on the Q. she went and got her PCR. She was positive on the PCR, and shortly thereafter, she started testing positive on the rats. So Q's not 100%. Now, I do think that's rare. I think there's actually something in her saliva, or I guess not saliva. Her I said saliva the other day. Her mucus, because it's obviously a nasal swab. Although they are, I think, doing their throat and their nose. I think it's something there. It's not their machine because he's testing positive, right? And she does test positive on the rats, so we know she had COVID those 3 times, but we don't know why the Q didn't pick it up. And I do believe my son, who actually works in the biomedical research field, he actually called Q and had a conversation about it. I don't remember exactly what they told him, and I've promised one of our group members that I'll go find out what they said. So nothing's 100%, but definitely using a test before someone comes in your house gives you much better peace of mind than doing nothing. But we're talking about layers here. You never want to let somebody in your house that you don't know what they've been doing or that's not COVIDing without having multiple layers, without having, testing them, having their mask on, having your windows open or your AC running, and all your air filters going. You want that Swiss cheese model in place. You want your mask on to protect yourself as well. So if I'm gonna have a trade person in, I honestly don't test my trade people. I don't think they would allow it. We do test our infusion nurse that comes in to give my daughter her infusion. She's amenable to that. And we test the nurse outside on our breezeway. She sits around and chats. These tests run 20 to 30 minutes. And so that's also a time constraint for people. But we go to the breezeway. She does her test. And then we let her in to give my daughter's infusion because she's going to be sitting in a room with my daughter for 6 hours. Now she's super great about keeping her mask on, and she walks out on the deck if she's going to take a drink or eat. And of course, my daughter's mask, we have multiple layers there going on, windows open, air filters running. And so for her, we do. But if someone's coming in to say, look, we had an electrician in that had to look at some light switches. Well, we just make sure that they have an N95 mask on that we provide. We have a little individually packaged R's that we give them. And if they won't put it on, then we don't let them in the house. I mean, I won't be bullied like that. There will be, if they're coming in and they're being paid to do work in my house, then I will find someone who will wear a mask, or they won't come in. It's just that simple. And then I also make sure all of my windows are open. I have a CO2 meter, make sure that, my CO2 is down in the 400 or 500s, have my air filters. Your air filter goes at the source of infection. So wherever they're going to be working, that's where your air filter, your most powerful air filter should be, is in the area that they're working. And yes, you can do it outdoors. You can do any of these. If you want to use a Q outdoors, run an extension cord, use the Q outdoors, or you could have them swab outdoors. You could have it plugged in inside of your first, or you could grab the cartridge and stick it in inside and then have them wait. So waiting for metrics for those who prefer NAATs. Yeah, that's my idea. I bought 1 metrics reader and 6 tests. Haven't used anyone yet. Does anyone know if I could get a return and get a refund? I don't know. I'm assuming you bought them from Peach. I don't know if you could or not. Having the metrics reader is not necessarily a bad thing because you may want to switch to it and use it. I just don't know about the integrity of your 6 tests, but I do think that Peach will replace them when they error. It's just not sort of helpful in the moment as you're like trying to do a test and you're worried, and then you get an error, and then you either have to blow another test, or if you don't have one, you have to wait for other tests to come along. So that's the only caveat I would say with the tests, that if you've bought them from Peach, is they just be prepared, they may error on you for improper storage. Thank you, Joan. Yes, it's SC Fall 10. That's absolutely correct. For the discount code for Rover. Oh, someone got it to work. Good job. And since all the tests are relatively new, if you don't get an invalid test with Lucera, or you still get a control line with the Rapid, is it reasonable to assume they're really not expired? I'm not sure I super understand that question. I would assume that if you don't get an invalid test with Lucera, it's okay. I would assume that it's probably working just fine. The reagents are ticky enough that if they're erroring out for, spoilage with temperature, if they're no longer working, they're going to error out as well. So I really personally don't have a problem with the Luceras being a little bit past their date, as long as they're not erroring out. Now, again, that's my opinion. That's not the manufacturer's opinion. They're not going to tell you that. They're also not going to tell you can pull their test. Besides the fact that they want to sell more tests, it's also like not in their, they have to only give you the information that they have approval for from the FDA. So if Lucera has been stored improperly, will it definitely show the error message? Is there any chance it could be damaged and that wouldn't be obvious? I don't think it could be damaged enough not to error. I think that the reader inside is sensitive enough that it can detect those minute chemical changes, and when it gets to the point that it doesn't work, it just throws an error. I've ordered FlowFlex from Amazon. They have a white and a blue box 5 tests for $3.99. Is that the okay one? I knew I should have pulled that data up before I talked to you guys. It's really easy to find. It's right on the FDA website. My assumption is if they're selling them again for vendors in the US, then it's fine. It's just if you have somewhere that's importing them. Oh, there is another test actually out there that we were interested in. Several members of our groups in Europe use something called the PlusLife. And their tests are actually really cheap. It turns out, that the test, if we could import it from China, it's about $200 for the reader, and you could get 20 tests for another 200. So for your first round, you could get 20 tests and a reader for about $400, which would make you have about a $20 test price. But then if you bought tests after that, they're, like I said, they're only like $9 each. And so we were trying to see if we could get a group buy going for that, but they're not approved in the US, and we're afraid we may send them a whole lot of money and be out when customs looks them over and says, nope, you need to send them back. So anybody who's in Europe who's using those, who maybe has an in or maybe a European vendor that is a little bit more accessible, that might be another option in the future. Your mods are diligently working hours every week to try to find testing options that work for us. We're not just sitting around going, these tests are gone. Everyone's just out of luck, because we want them also for our families too. And so we are definitely sharing with you the information as we get it. Will Metrics offer a test to treat service? No, not that I know of. I mean, who knows in the future? Like I said, they're a startup. They may someday, but right now that's not on their agenda. Any update on the triple false negative? Sorry, Tom, I haven't. She had not eaten or drank anything. Q was informed. I don't remember what they told her. I just sort of chunked that up into the we can't use this system with her box in my brain, and then made sure that we got PCRs and any other things. And I don't know. I wish we had Lucera at the time. We didn't, and that way we could have seen did she only not become positive on the Q? Could the other NAATs detect her or not? But we never had that situation, because surprisingly, they haven't been infected again. With the new variant circulating, I'm sort of expecting them to be infected again within the next couple of months. And if that happens, then I'm definitely going to make sure she does a Lucera to see if they work on her. But I'm going to ask him. I promise. I know Gertie wants to know. I will ask and find out what they said. No contact PCRs actually covered by insurance. Right now, when the EUA expired in May, and they're supposed to use up any existing funding, but the insurance companies just stopped covering stuff. And so we actually ran into that in my clinics. We were going to use a NAAT test, but insurance just stopped paying for them. Like insurance just stopped paying for PCRs in a lot of cases. And so we went with the FlowFlex, because we actually offer them no charge to our patients. We just absorb that cost, and we could absorb the cost of a FlowFlex. We couldn't absorb the $35 of a NAAT for every patient. That wouldn't have worked. We would have not been able to stay in business with that expense. So I think that's going to vary by your area, and we should all be doing our research ahead of time before we need it. Is a NAAT test that is using a NAAT test that is made for nasal, throat, saliva our best bet. Q is nasal only. So, I mean, none of the NAAT tests right now will tell you that they're made for a throat, okay? Except, I mean, metrics will tell you you can spit, which again, how hard is it to pool spit, right? I mean, metrics won't tell you you can pool it, but you could, you know, I mean, if everybody spits in the little container, then you've got some of everybody's spit. So they're all technically nasal only right now. Q is supposed to be nasal only, metrics is supposed to be nasal only, Lucera is supposed to be nasal only. But the data, if you go in and look at the data, and you can go back in our groups and you can see some of the discussions where the data shows that if you do include saliva, that you increase your sensitivity of your test. So at my house, even if we use a Q, it's a tiny little swab, but we still get a throat, nose, on the Q. Yes, we didn't talk directly to Pfizer. We talked to another vendor that did let us know that yes, Pfizer Lucera will be restarting production. However, it will not be for, according to our sources, it will not just be for the COVID. It will be COVID flu combo is the only one they're going to produce, according to our sources. That's great that you got one with an expiration date of December 2023. They must still be producing some then. My guess is they probably have some vendor contracts with some corporations, and so they may still have some that aren't available to the public. But even the Rover guy said he could get another batch, and he thought though that they were also going to be October expiration dates. He didn't think that there were going to be any past October, so we'll just have to see. I got another replacement, September, December. Okay. Have a 4 o'clock meeting. Thank you. I've used expired Luceras in the past. As long as it doesn't error, can I be confident in the result? We talked about that. Yes. I don't know what to do about PCRs because Kaiser has abandoned infectious control and now requires people to come into their labs, into a bathroom, and test in a bathroom with a mask off. So if you don't have COVID before, you would have it after. Honestly, if you can, get a VersaFlow Papper. As you could go in and get your test and your VersaFlow Papper. You could pull the hood out. You could do your test with that positive pressure ventilation going under your hood, and you could come out and do that. The other thing is if you were going to, I don't know if there's a way to walk outside. If you could go in there with your P100 on, preferably your fit tested P100, grab the test, walk outside, do your test, come back in and hand it to them for your PCR. So either those would be my two solutions. If I had Kaiser and I had to go in and they would tell me I had to do the test in the bathroom, I would either wear a VersaFlow, pull my hood slightly up and do my swab, or I would try to negotiate going outside to do it. Also, guys, check mobile phlebotomist in your area. I know where I live, there's lots of different mobile phlebotomy companies that come to your house to do things like draw blood. And some of them will also come to your house and do things like COVID swabs. So I know that LabCorp had a on the go, like you could order it from home service for a little while, and they were horribly slow. I think a couple people that I knew, it took them like 5 or 6 days to even get the swab before to send it back. By the time they got results, it was way too late. But if you have a mobile phlebotomist who has that LabCorp relationship and they can bring the swab to your house, do the swab, take it back for processing at LabCorp, then you could get it quicker that way. The test that's not approved for the US, that's called PlusLife. If you want to PM me, I can give you some information. And yeah, if you could get family to bring it back from Europe with like a nice chunk of test. I mean, my idea was get that reader and get as many tests as you could use because their expiration date wasn't until like a year off. Get as many tests as you would use for like a year, and then go from there. Yeah, PlusLife readers called me. Thanks, Sandy. Okay. Let's see, is there anything else? It doesn't default to free economy shipping. Yeah, I just chose 2-day shipping to make sure that that when you order your Luceras from Health Rover, I wouldn't do the free economy shipping 5 to 8 business days in this heat right now. In the fall, that might be okay, but I would go ahead and pick the 2-day shipping option. For me was like $8. So I'm sure it depends on where you are, but I would hit that 2-day shipping option. Let's see. Can someone share a link to the throat swabs on Amazon? That link is, oh, Christina, you had it. Great. I said it's also up in the groups. Well, there's posts in the groups about pool testing, and the links are up there for those swabs to Amazon. I have a Lucira dated December 2023. Okay. I was trying to think where I got mine. That was from Lucira. Confident in the result. Yes. We have used expired Lucera's no errors, pushing towards end of the extension. Family going to the UK. Great. So completely down to bring a ton of tests back. Awesome. All right. I think that's all the questions that I see. If nobody else has any questions, thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out with me today. I want to talk to you about several other things, so I'm probably going to pop up some other just chats like this because I have some other things on my mind. I want to do an update on the mask and the PAPRs and sort of tell you where we landed out in my family with which things work best for us in terms of our N95s and our PAPR situations. I also want to talk to you a little bit more about the far UV option, and as I've learned more, the different things that I've found out about far UV. Yes, I'm Familia Hernandez Darling on Facebook in case you want to DM. I'm excited to keep the conversation going. I think, guys, like the only way, COVID's not going away. It's not. We're never going to control a pandemic. It's always going to be here. But we do now have some reasonable options and ways to avoid infection and still integrate somewhat into society. I mean, are we ever going to go and hang out at a, packed concert anymore and be safe? Probably we're not. But can we go through our day to day and be able to do the things that give our life meaning and have connections with each other? We can. And we really need to be thinking about starting a clean air revolution. Like, it's not going to start with the government. It's not going to start with even the healthcare system. I mean, my first interest right now is also trying to figure out how do we push healthcare accessibility, because that's the number one issue. Even those of us who are going to do everything that we can in our power to avoid infection have to access the healthcare system. So I think that these are conversations that are still really worth having. And I hope that, our community has been around and we've been together now for several years. And I think that it's time that we start doing a little bit more, maybe organizing too, to try to help push out and affect some of these things that will make our own lives easier. So I have some ideas about that as well. So stay tuned, hang around. I'll post some other events, and hopefully you guys will pop in, and we'll keep working our way through this together.